The morning sun catches the dew on my David Austin roses just the way Harold always said it would when we planted them 37 years ago. I'm kneeling in the soft earth behind our Victorian home, my arthritis protesting but my heart singing as I deadhead the pink lady blooms. The scent of jasmine drifts over from Mrs. Patterson's fence, mixing with the rich smell of coffee brewing in my kitchen, a perfect Tuesday morning in my little slice of paradise here in Maplewood. At 74, I've learned to savor these quiet moments. The house settles around me with familiar creaks and sighs, like an old friend sharing secrets. Harold built this place with his own hands, board by board, room by room, back when David was just a gap-toothed boy who believed his daddy could build castles. Now the wraparound porch Harold painted every 3 years needs fresh coats, and some of the gingerbread trim is showing its age, but it's still solid. Still home. I'm brushing soil from my gardening gloves when I hear the car doors slam out front, 2 doors, which is odd because David usually comes alone for his monthly visits. Through the climbing roses on my garden trellis, I catch a glimpse of his silver BMW and my stomach does a little flip. Something about the deliberate way those doors closed, the sharp click of heels on my front walkway, sets my teeth on edge. Mom? David's voice carries through the house as he uses his key, a key I gave him years ago for emergencies, back when I trusted that he'd only use it as such. We're here. We. That would be Jessica, his wife of 12 years, a woman who's never quite looked me in the eye during our conversations. I hear her heels clicking across my hardwood floors, probably leaving marks despite my gentle reminders about the house slippers I keep by the door for guests. I make my way through the back door, pausing to rinse my hands at the kitchen's sink Harold installed the year before his heart attack. The kitchen still smells like the cinnamon cookies I baked this morning, a habit I can't seem to break even though it's just me now. David loved my snickerdoodles when he was young. He'd eat half the batch before they cooled, leaving crumbs on the counter and chocolate fingerprints on the cabinet doors. "There's my beautiful mother," David says, but something in his tone feels rehearsed, like he's delivering lines in a play. He's wearing his expensive navy suit, the one he saves for important client meetings, and his smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. Jessica stands slightly behind him, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching a leather portfolio that seems oddly formal for a family visit. "I wasn't expecting both of you," I say, accepting David's brief hug. He smells like expensive cologne and something else, nervousness, maybe. The same scent that clung to him as a teenager when he'd been caught in some mischief. "But you know you're always welcome. I just pulled cookies from the oven." Jessica finally meets my gaze, and what I see there makes my chest tighten. It's the look a cat gives a mouse before the pounce, calculating, predatory, patient. She's never looked at me that way before, usually preferring to study her phone or find excuses to step outside for calls during family gatherings. "Actually, Mom, we wanted to talk to you about something important," David says, his hand resting on the back of Harold's old chair at the head of our oak dining table. Even that small gesture feels presumptuous, territorial. "Something that could really help you out." The late afternoon light streaming through my lace curtains suddenly feels harsh instead of golden. The house seems to hold its breath around us, as if it senses what I'm beginning to feel in my bones, that this isn't a social call. This is something else entirely. "Well then," I say, reaching for the teapot I filled just minutes ago, back when my biggest worry was whether the roses would need extra water. "Let me pour the tea, and you can tell me what's on your mind." But as I watch Jessica settle into my chair, Harold's in my chair, where we shared 46 years of morning coffee and evening conversations, I can't shake the feeling that whatever they're about to tell me will change everything. The cookies suddenly taste like ash in my mouth, and the home that's sheltered me through decades of joy and sorrow feels fragile as spun glass. Something is terribly, terribly wrong. The Earl Grey steams between us like a barrier, but Jessica doesn't touch her cup. She's too busy arranging papers from that leather portfolio, each document placed with surgical precision on my grandmother's lace tablecloth. David fidgets with his wedding ring, a nervous habit that started in high school before big tests, and I feel my motherly instincts war with a growing dread. "Mom, you know how much this house means to our family," David begins, and I notice he says, "our family," not, "you." The distinction feels important, though I can't say why. Dad put his heart and soul into every board, every nail. It's a beautiful legacy. I nod, running my fingers along the table's grain. Harold carved our initials into the underside of this very spot during our first Christmas here. EW plus HW forever. The memory feels like armor against whatever's coming. The thing is, Jessica interjects, her voice honey smooth, maintaining a property this size is becoming quite a burden. The roof needs work, the plumbing is original to the house, and frankly, Eleanor, you're not getting any younger. The way she says my name, not Mom, never Mom, even after 12 years, grates like fingernails on slate. I've never demanded she call me anything particular, but the formality always felt like a wall between us. "I manage just fine," I say, though even as the words leave my mouth, I think of the loose porch board I keep meaning to fix, the upstairs bathroom faucet that drips at night. David leans forward, and I see Harold in the set of his jaw, the earnest furrow of his brow. It breaks my heart how much he looks like his father when he's trying to convince me of something. "That's exactly what we want to help with, Mom. Jessica and I have been talking to a financial advisor, and we think there's a perfect solution." Jessica slides a document across the table. The letterhead reads, "Goldman and Associates, Estate Planning," and my mouth goes dry. "We're proposing a co-ownership arrangement," she says. David would be added to the deed as joint owner. That way, he can help with the financial burden of maintenance and improvements, and you'll have peace of mind knowing the property is protected. Protected? From what? I want to ask, but David is already talking again, his words tumbling over each other like water through a broken dam. "Think about it, Mom. You wouldn't have to worry about property taxes, insurance, repairs, all those headaches. I'd handle everything. You could just enjoy the house without the stress." I pick up the document, but the legal language swims before my eyes. Joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. Transfer of deed. Financial responsibility. The words feel foreign and threatening, like a language I was never meant to understand. "This is very sudden," I manage, setting the papers down. Through the dining room window, I can see Mrs. Chen's kitchen light, warm and steady. She's probably preparing dinner for one, same as me. The sight steadies me somehow. I need time to think about this. "Of course," David says quickly, but Jessica's smile tightens at the corners. "We just thought, well, with everything that's been happening in the neighborhood, the Hendersons' break-in last month, old Mr. Murphy falling and lying on his kitchen floor for 6 hours before anyone found him, we worry about you being here alone." My teacup rattles against the saucer as I set it down. I have my emergency button. I have Margaret next door. I'm not helpless, David. "No one's saying you are," Jessica says, but her tone suggests otherwise. "We're simply being proactive. Preventative. The way loving families should be. Loving families." The phrase sits wrong in my chest, like a pill swallowed sideways. I look around my dining room, at the built-in china cabinet Harold crafted to display my mother's dishes, at the Christmas photos spanning decades on the mantel, at the window seat where I've read thousands of pages while rain drummed against the glass. This house isn't just a burden to be managed, I say quietly. It's my home. It's where I raised you, where your father and I built our life together. I can't just sign it away. You wouldn't be signing it away, David insists, but something flickers in his eyes. Frustration. Impatience. You'd still live here. Still be the primary owner. I'd just be there to help when you need it. And when I don't need it. The question hangs in the air like smoke. Jessica's fingers drum once against the table, a sharp, staccato sound that makes me think of predators marking time. "Well," she says finally, hopefully that day won't come for many years. But if it does, if you ever need assisted living or memory care, the transition would be so much smoother. David would already be legally able to make decisions about the property. No courts, no complicated probate. Just family taking care of family. My blood turns to ice water. Memory care. As if I'm already halfway to losing my mind, as if this conversation itself is proof of my declining faculties. I appreciate your concern, I say, standing on legs that feel suddenly unsteady. But my answer is no. This house is mine. Harold left it to me, and I intend to live in it exactly as long as I'm able. David's face falls, and for a moment he looks like the little boy who used to cry when I wouldn't let him have ice cream for breakfast. But Jessica just smiles that cat-like smile and slides the papers back into her portfolio. Of course, she says. We understand. It's a big decision. But as they gather their things and prepare to leave, I catch something in David's expression that chills me more than the evening air creeping through the windows. It's the look he used to get when I'd say no to something he really wanted, not acceptance, but calculation. Planning. The look of a child who's simply decided to find another way to get what he wants. 3 days pass before David calls again. I'm in my sewing room, working on a quilt for the church auction, when the phone rings. The afternoon light filters through the sheer curtains Harold hung for me 20 years ago, and I'm lost in the rhythm of my stitching when his voice cuts through my piece. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation, he says without preamble. And I'm worried we didn't explain things clearly enough. I set down my needle, already feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that's become David's calling card lately. You explained perfectly well, sweetheart. I understood every word. Did you? His tone has an edge I don't recognize. Because Jessica and I drove by yesterday, and we noticed the gutters are overflowing. And that broken porch board, Mom, someone could get seriously hurt. Through my sewing room window, I can see the front porch. The board in question has a slight sag, nothing more. Harold would have fixed it in an afternoon, but these days I have to call repair services for everything, and they charge enough to make my pension weep. I have it on my list, I say, which is true. Right between organize medicine cabinet and call about squeaky back door. Your list. David sighs heavily, and I can picture him pinching the bridge of his nose the way he does when his teenage daughter Madison pushes his patience. Mom, maintaining a house this old is a full-time job. You can't keep putting things off. Before I can respond, I hear another voice in the background, Jessica, saying something I can't quite catch. David covers the phone, but I hear muffled conversation, urgent whispers. Listen, David says when he comes back, Jessica and I want to come over this weekend. Maybe bring Madison. We could help with some of those repairs, and we could talk more about the co-ownership idea. I think you'll see it makes sense when you really consider all the benefits. There's something in his voice that makes my spine stiffen. Benefits. As if I'm a business proposition instead of his mother. Saturday would be fine, I hear myself saying, though part of me wants to tell him I'm busy. But he's still my son, still the little boy who used to help me weed the garden and steal tastes of cookie dough when he thought I wasn't looking. Saturday arrives gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes old bones ache and spirits sag. I'm arranging fresh flowers, the last of my late-season roses, when I see David's BMW pull into my driveway, followed by a white contractor's van I don't recognize. My stomach drops. Through the lace curtains, I watch David emerge from his car along with Jessica and Madison, but there are 2 other men getting out of the van, work boots, tool belts, clipboards. This feels like an ambush. Mom. David calls as they troop up my front steps, the loose board creaking ominously under their weight. We brought some help. I open the door to find myself facing a small army. David's wearing jeans and a work shirt, trying to look casual, but Jessica is dressed like she's going to a business meeting. Madison, 17 and perpetually attached to her phone, barely glances up from her screen. The two contractors hover behind them like hired muscle. David, what's all this? These are the Peterson brothers, Mike and Tony. They do excellent work, and they happen to have some time today to look at your maintenance issues. Happen to have time. On a Saturday. In the rain. The lie sits between us like a third person in the conversation. I didn't ask for contractors, I say, but they're already pushing past me into my foyer, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floors Harold refinished himself just 5 years before he died. Sometimes we don't know what we need until someone points it out, Jessica says, pulling out her phone and beginning to photograph my front hallway. We're just being thorough. For the next 2 hours, I watch helplessly as these strangers invade my home. They poke at baseboards, peer into closets, take measurements and notes. David follows them around like an eager puppy, nodding seriously at their observations. Jessica documents everything with her phone, creating what looks like a comprehensive record of my home's supposed shortcomings. This wiring is original, Mike Peterson announces in my kitchen, shining a flashlight into the space behind my refrigerator. Probably hasn't been updated since the 70s. That's a fire hazard waiting to happen. The foundation has some settling, Tony adds from my basement, his voice echoing up through the floorboards. Nothing catastrophic, but it'll need attention in the next few years. Jessica makes notes on a legal pad, her pen scratching across the paper like tiny fingernails. Madison has wandered into my living room and is filming herself lounging in Harold's favorite armchair, probably for one of those social media videos I don't understand. Get away from there, I snap, surprising myself with the sharpness in my voice. Madison looks up, startled, and for a moment I see David as a teenager, caught in the act, guilty but defiant. Chill, Grandma. I'm just making content. Content. Of my private space, my memories, my life reduced to entertainment for strangers on the internet. Not in my house, you're not. David appears at my elbow, his hand on my shoulder in what might look like comfort but feels like restraint. Mom, she's just having fun. You don't mind, do you? But I do mind. I mind all of it, the contractors treating my home like a condemned building, Jessica cataloging my belongings like evidence, Madison turning my grief into performance art. I mind that no one asked my permission for any of this. I think that's enough for today, I say, my voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying through the house. The contractors look up from their clipboards, sensing the shift in atmosphere. We're almost finished with the assessment, Mike says. You are finished, I reply more firmly. Thank you for your time, but I'd like you to leave now. David's grip on my shoulder tightens. Mom, they're just trying to help. Look at this list, you've got thousands of dollars in necessary repairs. The roof alone is going to cost. I don't care what it's going to cost. The words come out louder than I intended, echoing through my house like a gunshot. This is my home, and I didn't ask for your help. Jessica looks up from her legal pad, and I see something cold and calculating in her expression. Eleanor, we're family. We're not trying to take anything away from you. We're trying to protect you. Protect me. From what? From living in my own house. From making my own decisions. From having any dignity left in my twilight years. Please leave, I say again, and this time there's steel in my voice that I didn't know I still possessed. All of you. Now. As they gather their things and file out of my house, David pauses in the doorway. We'll be back, Mom. This conversation isn't over. The threat, because that's what it was, a threat wrapped in filial concern, hangs in the air long after his car disappears down my street. I stand in my violated house, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs that have comforted me for 40 years, and I realize with crystal clarity that my son is no longer the ally I thought he was. He's become something else entirely. And I'm no longer sure I'm safe in my own home. The knock on my back door comes at 7:30 Monday morning, soft but insistent. I'm still in my quilted robe, nursing my first cup of coffee and watching a cardinal peck at the feeder Harold hung outside our kitchen window 23 years ago. Through the sheer curtain, I see Margaret Chen's familiar silhouette, small but sturdy, holding what looks like a covered casserole dish. "I saw the contractors Saturday," she says when I open the door, her dark eyes sharp with concern behind wire-rimmed glasses. "And I heard the shouting." Margaret doesn't mince words. It's one of the things I've always appreciated about her since she moved in next door 15 years ago after her husband passed. She's a retired high school English teacher, and she has that particular brand of no-nonsense clarity that comes from spending decades cutting through teenage drama to get to the truth. "Come in," I say, grateful for her presence in my kitchen. The morning light seems brighter with her here, the familiar space less haunted by Saturday's invasion. She sets down what turns out to be her famous chicken and dumpling casserole, enough for 4 meals, knowing I'll never ask for help but will accept food offered freely. "Eleanor, what's really going on with David?" I pour her coffee in Harold's favorite mug, the blue ceramic one with the chip on the handle that I can never bring myself to throw away. As I tell her about the co-ownership proposal, the contractors, Jessica's calculating notes, Margaret's expression grows darker. "That's not concern," she says flatly. "That's reconnaissance." The word hits me like a physical blow. Reconnaissance. Military terminology for gathering intelligence before an attack. "You really think?" "I think your son has forgotten who raised him." Margaret's voice carries the authority of someone who's seen every type of family dysfunction play out in parent-teacher conferences. "And I think his wife is driving this train." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rings. David's name appears on the caller ID, and my stomach clenches. I let it go to voicemail, but it rings again immediately. Then again. "Answer it," Margaret says quietly. "But put it on speaker." David's voice fills my kitchen, bright with false cheer. "Mom. How are you feeling today? Did you get a chance to think about what we discussed?" "I told you my answer, David." I know. But Mom, I got the estimate from the Peterson brothers. $23,000. Just for the essential repairs." He pauses, letting the numbers sink in. "That's more than half your annual income." My hands shake as I grip the phone. 23,000. The number is astronomical, impossible. I could live for a year on that money. "The roof alone needs $8,000 in work," David continues. "And that's just to keep it from leaking into the house and causing structural damage." "Mom, I'm trying to help you here." Margaret reaches across the table and squeezes my free hand. Her fingers are warm and steady, anchoring me. "David, I didn't ask for that estimate. Sometimes we have to do things for the people we love, even when they don't ask." His tone has shifted, become patronizing. "Jessica and I talked about it, and we're prepared to cover all the repairs as soon as you sign the co-ownership papers. Consider it an investment in the family home." An investment. Not a gift, not help offered freely, but an investment. The business language chills me more than the morning air seeping through my kitchen window. "I need to go," I say. "Mom, wait." I hang up. The silence in my kitchen feels fragile, like spun glass that might shatter with the wrong word. 23,000, I whisper. Margaret stands abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum. "I'm calling my nephew." "Your nephew?" "Danny Chen. He's a contractor in Portland, been doing this work for 20 years. He'll give us a second opinion." She's already dialing, her movements brisk and purposeful. Saturday morning surprise visits with contractors who happen to have time. That's not how legitimate business works, Eleanor. That afternoon, I make another call I've been dreading. Michael, my younger son, answers on the third ring from his surgical practice in Seattle. Mom. This is a nice surprise. How are you doing? Michael's voice is warm but distracted. I can hear the bustle of his medical office in the background, the familiar sounds of a busy healer's life. He became a surgeon partly to honor his father's memory, Harold having died of a heart attack that might have been prevented with better medical care. I'm fine, sweetheart. But I wanted to talk to you about something David suggested. I explained the co-ownership proposal as neutrally as I can, not wanting to bias him against his brother. Michael listens without interrupting, but I can hear his attention sharpening, the background noise fading as he steps somewhere private. Mom, he says when I finish, that actually doesn't sound unreasonable. Maintaining that big house is a lot of work, and David lives right there in town. Maybe it would take some pressure off you. My heart sinks. You think I should sign the papers? I think David has a point about the maintenance issues. And honestly, Mom, you're not getting any younger. Having legal protections in place. Legal protections from what? A pause. I can almost hear him choosing his words carefully, the way he does when delivering difficult diagnoses. From the possibility that someday you might need help making decisions. I see it all the time in my practice, elderly patients whose families have to go through legal nightmares when medical crises hit. Elderly patients. The phrase stings more than I expected. To Michael, I'm not his mother who raised him, bandaged his scraped knees, celebrated his graduation from medical school. I'm a potential medical crisis, a problem to be managed preventively. I have to go, I say, my voice barely steady. Patient consultation. After I hang up, I sit in Harold's chair by the front window, watching the neighborhood come alive with the rhythm of ordinary life. Mrs. Patterson walks her ancient beagle past my fence. The Hendersons, the ones who had the break-in David mentioned, wave from their front porch as they bring in their mail. Normal life. The life I've lived for 40 years in this house, the life that apparently everyone thinks I'm too old to handle anymore. But then Margaret appears at my front door with a manila folder and that determined expression she probably wore when facing down unruly students. Sometimes family isn't about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when the wolves come calling. Thursday morning arrives crisp and clear, the kind of October day that makes you believe in new beginnings. I'm arranging fresh mums in a mason jar when Danny Chen pulls up in a work truck that's seen better days but looks honest. No fancy lettering, no corporate logos, just a man and his tools ready to do an honest day's work. Danny is Margaret's nephew through marriage, a quiet man in his 40s with calloused hands and kind eyes behind safety glasses. He spends 3 hours going through my house with the thoroughness of a detective, photographing everything, taking measurements, making notes in a battered notebook that looks like it survived 1,000 job sites. Your house is solid, he tells me over coffee in my kitchen, his assessment folder spread between us. That's good craftsmanship from back when they built things to last. Yeah, you've got some maintenance issues, every 40-year-old house does, but nothing catastrophic. Relief floods through me like warm honey. The roof needs maybe 12 shingles replaced and some flashing work around the chimney. $600, tops. The gutters need cleaning and one section reattached. Another $200. He flips through his photographs. Whoever quoted you $23,000 was either incompetent or dishonest. $2,000 versus $23,000. The difference feels like the space between truth and lies, between help and exploitation. I'm still digesting this information when my phone rings Friday morning. An unfamiliar number with a local area code. Mrs. Whitman. This is Sandra Myers from Adult Protective Services. I received a call expressing concern about your welfare, and I'd like to schedule a home visit. The words hit me like ice water. Adult Protective Services. The agency that investigates elder abuse, neglect, the people who can declare you incompetent to live independently. I'm sorry, what kind of concerns? The caller indicated issues with property maintenance, possible safety hazards, and some incidents of confusion or poor judgment regarding financial decisions. Sandra's voice is professionally kind but carries the weight of authority. I'd like to come by this afternoon if possible. Someone called Adult Protective Services on me. Someone painted me as a confused old woman living in dangerous conditions. My hands shake as I give Sandra directions to my house, knowing exactly who made that call but unable to prove it. I spend the next 2 hours in a cleaning frenzy, dusting every surface, organizing every drawer, trying to make my home look like the well-maintained sanctuary it actually is. Margaret arrives with her own cleaning supplies, understanding without words what we're facing. This is harassment, she says, attacking my already clean bathroom with military precision. They're trying to intimidate you into signing those papers. Sandra Myers arrives at 3 o'clock sharp, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes but an official demeanor that makes my kitchen feel like an interrogation room. She settles at my table with a clipboard and begins asking questions with professional precision. How am I managing daily tasks? Do I have help with groceries, housekeeping, medical appointments? Have I experienced any confusion or memory problems? The caller mentioned deferred maintenance and some concerns about your decision-making regarding financial matters, Sandra explains, making notes as I answer. They also mentioned potential safety hazards. I want to ask who called, but I know she won't tell me. Instead, I watch her evaluate my life through the lens of official concern as she tours my house. She notes the loose porch board, examines the basement stairs, checks the smoke detectors I tested just last week. Overall, your home appears well-maintained, she concludes, and I nearly weep with relief. You clearly take pride in your property. However, I do see some minor maintenance issues that should be addressed. I have repairs scheduled, I say quickly. A contractor is coming next week. Sandra makes a note. That's good to hear. The caller also mentioned some confusion about legal documents, difficulty making sound financial decisions. There it is. The real reason for this visit. I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions. I'm sure you are. But Mrs. Whitman, are you experiencing any pressure from family members regarding financial or legal matters? The question hangs between us like a lifeline. I could tell her about David's co-ownership proposal, about Jessica's calculating notes and unexpected contractor visits. But David is still my son. Still the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. No, I lie. No pressure. After Sandra leaves, promising to close the case with no further action needed, I sit in my empty house feeling violated all over again. The phone rings within an hour. Mom, I heard APS came by today. David's voice is carefully neutral. Are you okay? How did you know about that? Margaret Chen told Jessica she saw an official car in your driveway. We were worried. A pause. Mom, I'm sorry it came to that. But maybe this is a wake-up call about accepting help when it's offered. A wake-up call. As if the visit from Adult Protective Services is a natural consequence of my stubbornness rather than a direct result of someone's manipulative phone call. Who called them, David? How would I know? Could have been anyone, a neighbor, someone from church. The important thing is you're okay. His voice takes on that patient, patronizing tone I've come to dread. But Mom, this shows that people are worried about you. Maybe it's time to seriously consider our proposal. That weekend, I discovered David has been busier than I thought. Mrs. Patterson mentions that your son stopped by to check on me when I wasn't home, asking about my daily routines and whether she'd noticed any concerning behavior. The mailman tells me someone claiming to be family has been asking about my mail delivery patterns. Then Monday brings the coup de grace. I return from my weekly hair appointment to find a white contractor van in my driveway and the smell of fresh paint in my house. The Peterson brothers are back. This time, they've let themselves in with a key I never gave them, and they're systematically painting over the sage green hallway walls Harold and I chose together 15 years ago. Afternoon, Mrs. Whitman, Mike Peterson calls down from my staircase, paint roller in hand. Your son wanted to surprise you with some interior freshening. My carefully chosen colors, the soft blue-gray dining room that reminded Harold of morning fog, the warm cream living room where we hosted 40 Christmas mornings, are disappearing under stark institutional white. Stop, I whisper, but they can't hear me over the sound of my heart breaking. This isn't about house maintenance anymore. This is about erasing me from my own home, one wall at a time. The white paint fumes make my eyes water, or maybe it's the tears I'm trying not to shed as I watch strangers obliterate the colors that held 40 years of memories. The Peterson brothers work with efficient indifference, covering my sage green hallway with the kind of sterile white you see in hospitals and institutions, places where individuality goes to die. Ma'am, you might want to step outside while we finish this section, Tony Peterson suggests, not looking up from his roller. Paint fumes can be pretty strong for older folks. Older folks. As if I'm a fragile creature who can't handle the realities of home improvement instead of a woman whose home is being vandalized without her consent. I didn't authorize this work, I say, but my voice sounds thin and powerless even to my own ears. Mike Peterson pauses, paint dripping from his brush onto my hardwood floors. Your son's taking care of everything, ma'am. He said you'd been wanting to freshen things up but weren't sure how to go about it. Another lie. I loved my colors exactly as they were, had spent months with Harold choosing each shade, testing paint samples in different light until we found the perfect palette that made our house feel like home. I called David, my fingers shaking as I dial. Hey, Mom. How do you like your surprise? David, these men are painting my house without my permission. Mom, we talked about this. You mentioned the walls looking tired, remember? I thought it would be nice to have it done while you were out. His voice carries that patient, slightly condescending tone that makes me question my own memory. Jessica picked out the colors. She has such an eye for design. Did I mention the walls? The doubt creeps in like poison, making me wonder if I'm losing my mind after all. But no, I would never have agreed to this stark, soulless white that makes my home look like a medical facility. I want them to stop. Mom, they're already halfway done. It would cost more to undo the work than to let them finish. Trust me, you're going to love it. Trust me. The words I once said to my children when they were scared of thunderstorms or first days of school. Now they sound like a threat. An hour later, David arrives with Jessica and Madison in tow. Jessica surveys the painting progress with obvious satisfaction, running her manicured fingers along the freshly painted trim like she's inspecting a renovation she commissioned. Doesn't it look amazing already? She gushes. So much brighter and more contemporary. Eleanor, you're going to feel like you're living in a completely different house. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. My house is becoming unrecognizable, stripped of the personality Harold and I carefully built together. I didn't ask for this, I say, but David is already pulling out his checkbook. The bill comes to $3,200, but I'm covering it as an early Christmas present. He writes the check with theatrical generosity. Jessica and I wanted to do something nice for you. $3,200 to destroy the colors I loved and replace them with sterile white. $3,200 for work I never wanted, creating a gift I'll have to live with every day. This stops now, I say, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Everyone out. David looks up from his checkbook, and for a moment his mask slips completely. I see something cold and predatory in his expression, something that chills me to the bone. Mom, that's not practical. They've already started. I don't care. This is my house, and I want everyone out now. Actually, Jessica interrupts, pulling out her leather portfolio with dramatic precision, that's not exactly accurate anymore. The world seems to tilt sideways. What do you mean? David sighs heavily, like a parent forced to deliver disappointing news to a difficult child. Mom, after the APS visit last week, Jessica and I consulted with an attorney. We were able to get emergency guardianship granted based on the concerns raised about your cognitive state and living conditions. Emergency guardianship. The words hit me like physical blows. My legs feel suddenly unreliable, and I reach for the wall, my newly white wall, to steady myself. That's impossible. I haven't been to court. No one evaluated me. It's a temporary measure, David says quickly, but his eyes won't meet mine. Just until we can get your situation stabilized. The attorney said it was the most compassionate way to protect you from decisions that could harm you. Margaret appears in my doorway, having heard the commotion from next door. She takes in the scene, the painters, the portfolio, my stricken face, and her expression turns thunderous. Show her the paperwork, she demands. Right now. Jessica produces a legal document with obvious satisfaction. I try to read it, but the words swim before my eyes. Emergency petition. Cognitive decline. Unable to maintain safe living conditions. Risk of financial exploitation. This is based on lies, I whisper. It's based on evidence, Jessica corrects coolly. The APS visit documented safety concerns. Your confusion about repair estimates showed questionable judgment. Multiple community members expressed concern about your welfare. Multiple community members. They've been building a case against me, systematically and carefully, turning my neighbors into witnesses for their fictional narrative of my incompetence. You orchestrated all of this, I say to David, the truth finally crystallizing with crystal clarity. The contractors, the inflated estimates, the APS call, you planned everything. I protected you, David snaps, and I finally see the real anger beneath his false concern. From making stupid decisions that could cost you everything. Do you have any idea what this property is worth, Mom? What you could lose through poor judgment. There it is. The truth at last. Not concern for my welfare, but concern for their inheritance. My house isn't my home to them, it's their future payday. Get out, I say, my voice barely above a whisper. Actually, Mom, I have legal authority now to make decisions about property maintenance and improvements. David's voice is cold, businesslike. The painting continues. I look around my violated home, at strangers covering my memories with institutional white, at my son and his wife treating my living room like a boardroom, at my granddaughter filming my humiliation for her social media followers. Margaret steps closer, her small frame radiating protective fury. Eleanor, we're calling a lawyer first thing Monday morning. That's your right, Jessica says smoothly. But court challenges take time, and in the meantime, David has full authority to act in Eleanor's best interests. Best interests. They've weaponized the language of love and care, turned it into legal justification for theft. The Peterson brothers resume their work, their brushes methodically erasing the last traces of the home Harold and I built together. David makes notes on a clipboard like a property manager surveying his new acquisition. Jessica photographs the progress for documentation. And I realize with crushing clarity that I'm no longer a person with rights and autonomy. I'm an obstacle to be managed, a problem to be solved, an elderly woman whose own family has declared her incompetent to live her own life. For the first time in 74 years, I understand what it means to be truly powerless. But as I watch my beautiful colors disappear under that cold white paint, something else crystallizes inside me. They may have legal papers and temporary authority, but they've made one critical mistake. They've underestimated exactly how much fight this old woman has left in her. The rain starts at dawn on Tuesday, October 15th, the kind of steady drizzle that seeps into your bones and makes everything feel hopeless. I'm standing at my kitchen window, watching droplets chase each other down the glass, when I see David's BMW pull into my driveway. It's barely 7 in the morning, and normal sons don't visit their mothers at this hour unless someone has died. But nothing about David feels normal anymore. I wrap my robe tighter and pad to the front door in my slippers, the hardwood floors cold beneath my feet. The white paint smell still lingers in the hallway, sharp and medicinal, making my home feel like a place where sick people go to recover. Through the peephole, I see David isn't alone. Jessica stands beside him holding an umbrella, and behind them lurks a man I don't recognize wearing a cheap suit and the aggressive posture of someone used to delivering bad news. "Mom, we need to talk," David says when I open the door. He pushes past me without waiting for an invitation, his wet shoes leaving marks on my floor. "This is Jim Morrison from Sunset Manor Senior Living. He's here to help with your transition." Transition. The word hits me like a slap. What transition? Jessica shakes rain from her umbrella with sharp, irritated movements. "Eleanor, we've been patient, but yesterday's episode showed us that you're not capable of making rational decisions about your living situation. For your own safety." Yesterday's episode. My voice rises higher than I intended. "You mean when I asked strangers to stop painting my house without permission?" "You became agitated and confused," David says, pulling out his phone to record our conversation. "You couldn't remember authorizing the work, became hostile toward contractors who were trying to help. Jim here specializes in difficult transitions for seniors experiencing cognitive decline." Jim Morrison steps forward with the practiced smile of a used car salesman. "Mrs. Whitman, I understand this feels sudden, but sometimes families have to make tough decisions. Sunset Manor has a lovely studio apartment available immediately, fully furnished, meals provided, 24-hour supervision." Supervision. The word tastes like poison in my mouth. "I'm not going anywhere." "Actually, you are," Jessica says, producing yet another legal document from her briefcase. "David's guardianship gives him authority to determine your living arrangements. We've already packed your essentials." My blood turns to ice. "Packed my what?" David won't meet my eyes. "Just the basics, Mom. Clothes, medications, some photos. Everything else will be safe here while we get the house ready for sale." Sale. The word explodes in my brain like a firecracker. "You're selling my house." "It's too much for you to maintain," Jessica says smoothly. "The proceeds will fund your care at Sunset Manor for years. It's the responsible thing to do." I look around my kitchen, at Harold's coffee mug still sitting in the sink, at the morning light filtering through curtains we hung together 30 years ago, at the small gouges in the cabinet door where David as a toddler had banged his toy hammer. 40 years of marriage, of raising children, of building a life, reduced to proceeds, to fund my imprisonment. "You can't do this," I whisper. "We can and we are," David says, his voice flat and businesslike. "The car's outside. Jim will drive you over, get you settled in." That's when I notice the suitcases by my front door, my own luggage, packed by strangers with my most personal belongings. The violation feels complete, total. They've been in my bedroom, my closet, my bathroom, deciding what parts of my life I'm allowed to keep. Through my front window, I see a white van pulling up behind David's car. Two men in work uniforms get out and begin unloading boxes, my boxes, labeled with black marker in Jessica's precise handwriting. Kitchen items. Bedroom linens. Personal effects. "You're throwing me out in the rain like garbage," I say, the reality finally sinking in completely. "We're protecting you," David insists, but he still won't look at me. "Sunset Manor is clean, safe, supervised. You'll have people to take care of you. People to take care of me. Not family, not love, not the life I built with my own hands, just paid strangers to manage what's left of my existence." I think of Harold, of the vows we made in this house, of the roses we planted together that are just now entering their autumn bloom. I think of Margaret next door, probably watching this scene unfold and powerless to stop it. "I want to call my lawyer," I say. "You don't have a lawyer," Jessica replies. And frankly, Eleanor, you're in no condition to make legal decisions right now. The sooner you accept help, the easier this will be for everyone. Jim Morrison clears his throat diplomatically. Mrs. Whitman, I have the car running. The room is ready, and lunch is served at noon. If we leave now, you'll have time to settle in before the afternoon activities. Activities. Like I'm a child going to summer camp instead of an elderly woman being forcibly removed from her home. I'm not leaving, I say, my voice steadier than I feel. David finally looks at me, and what I see in his eyes breaks my heart completely. Not love, not regret, not even guilt, just impatience with an obstacle that's taking too long to remove. Mom, you can walk out to the car with dignity, or Jim can call for assistance. But you're leaving either way. Assistance. Code for men who specialize in removing uncooperative elderly people from their homes. I look around my kitchen one last time, at the table where Harold and I shared 46 years of morning coffee, at the window where I've watched seasons change and grandchildren grow, at the life I thought was mine until 5 minutes ago. The rain drums against the windows like tears I'm too shocked to shed. Outside, the workers are loading my belongings into their van with efficient indifference, reducing my life to cardboard boxes and plastic bags. Can I say goodbye to Margaret? I ask. There's no time for dramatics, Jessica says. Besides, prolonged goodbyes just make these transitions harder. Harder for whom? I want to ask, but I know the answer. Harder for them to complete their theft without witnessing the human cost. I walk upstairs to get dressed, my legs feeling like they belong to someone else. In my bedroom, freshly painted white like a hospital room, I put on my best dress, the navy blue one Harold always said brought out my eyes. If I'm being exiled from my own life, at least I'll leave with dignity. When I come back downstairs, Jim Morrison is holding my coat and an umbrella that isn't mine. David and Jessica stand by the door like bailiffs, official and cold. Ready? Jim asks with professional cheerfulness. I nod, not trusting my voice. As we walk toward the door, I catch a glimpse of movement at Margaret's kitchen window, her face pressed against the glass, watching her friend being stolen in broad daylight. The rain soaks through my coat within seconds, cold and bitter as the truth I can no longer deny. My son, the little boy I rocked through fevers and nightmares, has become a stranger who sees me as nothing more than an inconvenience to be warehoused. As Jim's car pulls out of my driveway, I turn for one last look at the house Harold built for us, at the roses he planted for me, at the life I thought would always be mine. The workers are already changing the locks. The first thing that hits you about Sunset Manor isn't the sight of it, though the institutional beige walls and fluorescent lighting are depressing enough. It's the smell. Disinfectant and industrial floor cleaner try to mask the underlying odors of incontinence, overcooked vegetables, and something indefinable that I'll later recognize as the scent of abandoned hope. Jim Morrison leads me through the lobby with its fake plants and motivational posters about embracing your golden years, past clusters of elderly people parked in wheelchairs like forgotten luggage. Some stare at a television mounted too high on the wall, others sleep sitting up, a few rock gently and hum songs from decades past. Your room is on the second floor, Jim says cheerfully, as if I'm checking into a hotel instead of being processed into storage. Nice view of the courtyard. You'll love it. Room 237 is 8 feet by 12 feet, smaller than my walk-in closet at home. The furniture is bolted to the floor, a narrow bed with a plastic mattress cover, a particle board dresser, a single chair positioned by a window that looks out onto a concrete courtyard where no one ever goes. My suitcases sit on the bed like accusations, holding the pathetic remnants of a life that once filled a 4-bedroom house. Lunch is in 20 minutes, Jim explains, handing me a printed schedule of daily activities. Bingo at 2, music therapy at 3, dinner at 5:30. Lights out at 9. Lights out. Like I'm in prison or a children's boarding school, not a place where adults are supposed to live with dignity. After Jim leaves, I sit on the edge of my narrow bed and finally let myself cry. The tears come in waves, grief for Harold, rage at David, despair at the speed with which my life has been dismantled. Through the thin walls, I can hear Mrs. Kowalski next door calling for her daughter who never comes, and the constant beeping of call buttons that go unanswered for too long. The first week passes in a haze of institutional routine and crushing loneliness. Breakfast at 7:30, runny eggs and toast that tastes like cardboard. Morning activities that feel designed for people with the mental capacity of children. Lunch at noon, mystery meat and vegetables boiled into submission. Afternoon naps that become the only escape from the suffocating sameness of each day. I try calling David twice. The first time, Jessica answers and tells me he's busy. The second time, he picks up but sounds distracted, like I'm interrupting something important. How are you settling in, Mom? I want to come home, David. Mom, we've talked about this. That house was too much for you. Give Sunset Manor a chance, I bet you'll make friends. Friends. As if friendship can be manufactured in a place where people come to die. Have you put the house on the market yet? A pause. We're getting it ready. New carpet, some updates. Jessica thinks it'll show better with a few improvements. Improvements. They're erasing every trace of Harold and me, turning our home into a generic commodity for strangers to buy. I want to see it. I want to get some of my things. Mom, all your important stuff is with you. The rest is just clutter. You don't need it anymore. Don't need it anymore. 40 years of accumulated love, memories, mementos, dismissed as clutter by the son I raised. David, please. Just let me visit. Let me see my roses one more time. Mom, you need to focus on your new life now. Looking backward isn't healthy. He hangs up, and I sit in my bolted-down chair staring at the concrete courtyard, feeling more abandoned than I've ever felt in my life. The physical deterioration starts almost immediately. The institutional food sits like lead in my stomach, but I can't bring myself to eat much anyway. Everything tastes like despair. I lose 15 pounds in 3 weeks, my clothes hanging loose on a frame that's shrinking daily. Sleep becomes impossible. The thin walls mean I hear every cough, every cry, every shuffle of feet in the hallway. Mrs. Chen, not my Margaret, but a different Mrs. Chen who shares my fate, wanders the halls at night calling for her son in Mandarin. Mr. Rodriguez in the room across from mine plays the same Lawrence Welk album over and over until the nurses take his radio away. But it's the silence that's worst. The silence where conversation with Harold used to be, where the familiar sounds of my own home once provided comfort. Here, even the silence feels institutional, broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of shift changes. I develop panic attacks in the dining room, surrounded by residents who can no longer feed themselves or remember their own names. The walls feel like they're closing in, and I have to grip the sides of my chair to keep from running. But where would I run to? The doors are locked at night, and during the day, I have nowhere to go. Margaret calls once, but the conversation feels surreal through the fog of my depression. Eleanor, I'm working on getting you a lawyer. Danny's helping me research elder law attorneys. It doesn't matter, I tell her, my voice flat as old soda. They have guardianship. They have legal papers. Legal papers can be challenged. This isn't over. But it feels over. Sitting in this room that smells like industrial cleaning solution and despair, wearing clothes that no longer fit my shrinking body, I feel like I'm disappearing piece by piece. The worst part isn't the awful food or the lack of privacy or even the crushing loneliness. The worst part is how quickly I'm forgetting what it felt like to have control over my own life. The simple dignity of choosing when to wake up, what to eat, whether to water my flowers or read by the window, all of it feels like memories from someone else's life. Some nights, I lie in my narrow bed listening to the institutional sounds around me and wonder if David was right. Maybe I am too old, too confused, too much trouble. Maybe this is what I deserve. Maybe I really am just a burden who's better off warehoused with the other forgotten people. But then I remember Harold's hands as he planted our roses, and I know with crystal clarity that this isn't living, it's just waiting to die. And I'm not ready to die yet. 3 weeks into my imprisonment at Sunset Manor, Margaret appears in the lobby carrying a manila envelope that will change everything. I'm sitting in the community area, pretending to watch a game show while planning my escape. Eleanor. Her voice cuts through the institutional fog like salvation. She wraps me in a hug that smells like real life, coffee and fresh air, and for the first time in weeks, I remember what it feels like to be human. You look terrible, she says with characteristic bluntness. I feel terrible. My voice comes out as a whisper. Margaret spreads papers across the sticky vinyl table between us. Danny and I have been doing detective work. Look at this. The first document is a real estate inquiry dated 6 months ago, long before David mentioned co-ownership. Meridian Development Group asking about purchasing underutilized single-family properties for high-density redevelopment. My hands shake as I read correspondence with terms like acquisition target and motivated seller situations. There's a map of my neighborhood with my house circled in red, labeled priority acquisition, estate sale potential. But how does this connect to David? I ask. Margaret pulls out printed emails between David and Meridian Development. 8 months of correspondence. David, thanks for reaching out regarding your mother's property. Meridian is prepared to offer significantly above market value for a quick sale. We understand you may need to explore guardianship options to facilitate the transaction. The words blur as their meaning sinks in. David hasn't been protecting me, he's been selling me. Look at the financial section of his guardianship petition, Margaret says. He listed your house at $847,000. But Meridian's preliminary offer, $1.2 million. $1.2 million. I stare at the number until it stops looking like currency and starts looking like a motive for destroying an old woman's life. Margaret shows me photos of my house, unrecognizable now, renovated for quick sale. The garden where Harold and I planted roses has been ripped out. A "for sale" sign sits in my front yard. Something inside me crystallizes into diamond-hard resolve. I remember exactly who I am, Eleanor Whitman, who may be 74 but is not dead yet. Margaret, I say, my voice stronger than it's been in weeks, let's destroy my son. Patricia Goldman's law office feels like stepping back into a world where I'm treated as a competent adult. The secretary offers me real coffee in a ceramic mug, and for the first time in a month, I remember what choices feel like. Patricia is a force of nature disguised as a grandmother, steel gray hair, sharp blue eyes, and a voice that probably makes opposing attorneys wake up in cold sweats. Mrs. Whitman, I've reviewed Margaret's documents. In 30 years of elder law, this is one of the most egregious cases of financial exploitation I've ever seen. She settles behind her mahogany desk. Your son isn't just stealing from you, he's systematically destroying your life for profit. Hearing someone validate what I've been feeling gives me strength I didn't know I still possessed. Can you get me out of Sunset Manor? I can get you your life back. But this is going to be a fight. Patricia opens her legal pad. We'll file emergency motions, one to vacate the guardianship, another to halt the house sale, and a third to investigate David for elder abuse and fraud. For 3 hours, I write. I pour 40 years of motherhood onto paper, the good memories that make David's betrayal so painful, and the recent memories that prove his manipulation. Each sentence feels like reclaiming a piece of myself. Margaret arrives with Danny and boxes of evidence. Photos of my house before and after unauthorized renovations. Statements from neighbors who witnessed David's suspicious behavior. Screenshots from Madison's social media, videos of my crying, my humiliation turned into content for teenage entertainment. She posted videos of you asking them to stop painting your house, Danny says quietly. Tag them #elder abuse like it's entertainment. The violation feels complete, but Patricia nods approvingly. This shows callous disregard for your dignity. No loving family documents and elderly relatives' distress for social media. By evening, we have our battle plan. Emergency motions Monday. Psychological evaluation Tuesday to prove my competency. Wednesday, if all goes well, I'll be home. This case will attract media attention, Patricia warns. Are you prepared for that? I think about other elderly people warehoused like me, victims of greedy children. Good. Maybe others need to know this happens. Tomorrow, I start taking my life back. 6 months later, I'm kneeling in my garden again, replanting the roses David and Jessica destroyed. The morning sun catches the dew on new blooms just like Harold always said it would, and for the first time since this nightmare began, my house truly feels like home. The courtroom victory was swift once Patricia presented the evidence. Judge Harrison's words still echo: adult children who systematically exploit their parents represent the worst kind of betrayal. David and Jessica left in handcuffs, facing felony elder abuse charges and federal fraud investigation. The fraudulent guardianship was dissolved. The house sale voided. My freedom restored. Margaret appears at my garden gate with coffee and her satisfied smile. The newspaper wants another interview. I shake my head, brushing soil from my gloves. The story went viral, #Justice for Eleanor trending for weeks as other families shared similar horror stories. But I'm done being a symbol. I just want to be myself again. Did you see David's sentencing notice? Margaret asks gently. 3 years in federal prison. Jessica got 2. Madison, thankfully a minor, was spared criminal charges but lost her social media privileges. I feel no satisfaction in their punishment, only grief for the family we could have been. But then I look at my roses, survivors, like me, blooming despite everything that tried to destroy them. Margaret settles beside me on Harold's old garden bench, and we watch the neighborhood wake up. This is what David never understood: home isn't about property values or inheritance potential. It's about love that chooses to stay, to fight, to bloom again. My new will is filed with Patricia, leaving everything to Margaret and the charities Harold and I supported. Not as revenge, but as love, the kind that builds rather than destroys. The roses are beautiful this year. Harold would be proud. I'm 75 now, and I'm finally home.